Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Dead Malls, your one home for the coziest mall mini documentaries and everything retail related. And welcome everyone back once again to the Windy City. On this beautiful evening, I traveled 9 hours both ways to see a mall which, like many in this devastating retail year of 2024, was closing its doors for good. A classic Season 4 mall covered here a few years ago. On April 21st, 2024, Stratford Square Mall closed its doors for good. And among the closing crowd, I was there to see it and capture it on film and to tell its story one last time. So before I spoil any of this evening's beautiful sun-bathed mall, I want to take a moment and shout out our winner who was able to successfully guess the next mall. Very nice job, the QTube. If you would like to have your chance of being shouted out in the next episode, stick around for the next challenge. Anyways, let's dive in here, begin the story of Stratford, and see how it was doing as of its final evening on April 21st, 2024. I arrived at the mall at around 3:30 in the afternoon, and would end up sticking around until it closed at 6 p.m., so expect to see every inch of this place, or at least what I was able to find within my almost 3 hours of exploration. And also, let me know down below if you see yourself at any point throughout this video. I know a lot of members of the Dead Mall community showed up here for its final night, as has now become a sort of tradition with mall closings. So yes, in its final night, Stratford Square was packed, with people coming and going to walk one last time, reminisce with family members, or take photos and videos like me. There were several instances where I overheard people walking through and them commenting on just how funny it was that everyone was showing up for its closing, yet no one would ever show up when it was still open. Before we begin the story of Stratford Square, I'll let you all enjoy a bit of its golden sights, and it was actually really cool because even if it was the end, there was just so much life in this final evening. And it felt like the mall was in a time warp, a different reality, and one last time were we able to walk it packed like it would have been back in the glory years. Stratford Square Mall's story begins over 50 years ago in what was at the time the middle of nowhere. In 1979, the crossroads of Gary Avenue and Chick Road in Bloomingdale, Illinois, was just the small intersection of two-lane pavement and a dirt road. But all around and soon to be sprouting up were the dozens of new suburbs, as Metro Chicagoland was expanding, and at that, booming. New regional shopping centers were being built all over the city at a breakneck pace. Woodfield, Hawthorne, and Fox Valley to name just a few, and all of these were the same massive two-story 100-plus store mall types, the style that was becoming so popular. By the turn of the decade, constructing malls had shifted from its small community park-like vibes into shoving as many name brands down your throat as possible. And the residents moving into their newly built homes in the sprawling suburb of Bloomingdale were about to get their very own taste of that shopping mall fever. Not only was this mall busy with visiting locals in its final evening, but it was also busy with parties and celebrations, book signings, and what a lot called the funeral. So stick around and keep your eyes out because throughout this video, there'll be several instances where you see these giant mall walks led by a train conductor, the remains of one final feast, and so much more. In 1978, the Urban Investment and Development Company first approached the village of Bloomingdale to build a new shopping center. The town quickly obliged, honored to get the next mall. Urban Investments was no stranger to the mall game, having built many of the city's largest shopping centers. Hawthorne, River Oaks, and Fox Valley were all projects under their belt, and Stratford Square, as the new mall would quickly become known, would be no different. Major anchor stores to announce opening with the mall included Montgomery Ward, Carson Pier Scott, Weebolt's, and Marshall Fields, with additional space for two others. The mall itself would be gargantuan, spanned out over 1 million square feet of retail space across 2 stories. In early May of 1979, ground would be broken, and construction would begin shortly after. Scheduled to open in the spring of 1981, the roads around the mall were paved and widened, and a sea of concrete parking was created to entomb the mall. New houses soon began to sprout up all around the area, as Bloomingdale's new mall was preparing its grand opening, and it would be unlike any other in the metro. Before we open Stratford Square, we'll head down the old JCPenney wing, and below the children's play area was being stripped away, sold to another company, I was told. Also, you remember those old chairs that were living out retirement from our first visit, way back in season 4? Well, they're still here, to my astonishment, which just makes me wonder if they're still resting in the mall in its now abandoned state. Also, the final night here at Stratford really brought out all of the documentarians in the area. As you'll see, like Midwestern dads going out to look at a storm, everyone became a dead mauler here at Stratford Square, including this lady ahead of me with what looked like a pretty sweet camera rig.
Oh, dang. Sort of decimated the player.
The chairs are still here. They're still. Construction was a relatively smooth process, and little burdened the mall's deadline. Interestingly, Urban Investments reported that Stratford was filling its space in record time, filling to 65% just after ground was broken, and up to 90% by 1980, a full year before the mall's opening. Going forward, and with the opening on the horizon, it was clear Metro Chicagoland would get themselves yet another mall, but only time could tell if this new mall in the middle of nowhere would actually work out. On Monday, March 9th, 1981, Stratford Square Mall would officially open its doors to the public, with premier anchors Marshall Fields, Weebolts, Carson Pierce Scott, and Montgomery Ward, each boasting their own massive two-story department stores. Betwixt them lie the mall itself. Sprawled out over 2 levels, Stratford featured an extremely unique design, heralding back to the park-like days of malls. Tile floors, several garden courts with lush trees, mystical fountains of varying degrees and sizes, and dozens of skylights, which stretched down and back throughout each of its many courts and corridors, all of which to illuminate the mall's wooden designs. In the center court lie the center within the center, the sort of town square of Stratford, which seamlessly blended the mall's specialty stores, food court, Plit-4 theaters, and beautiful fountain display all into one seamless experience, which itself would remain open into the later evening hours, while the rest of the mall would close. An excerpt from the Chicago Tribune from around its grand opening more accurately describes just how magical this all was. Stratford Square is a marvelously magical fantasy world. Strolling through the festival court with its cascading waterfall, you'll be surrounded by the color, sights, and sounds of performing mimes and strolling musicians. Outdoor cafes, food stores with cheeses and other delicacies, restaurants for snacks or relaxed dining, and of course, the Plit-4 cinemas. What makes all of the festival courts so wonderful is that you can be entertained into the late evening, even after the rest of the shopping center is closed. Night or day at Stratford Square, you'll love being there. And that its residents did. Although being surrounded by miles of cornfields, Stratford would soon capture the heart of the metro. With 180 planned stores to come, 90 of which opening day one, residents walking into the mall got to experience the likes of Kinney Shoes, Musicland, The Limited, MC Sports, Aladdin's Castle, Chess King, Foot Locker, Sam Goody, KB Toys, and Cinnabon, among many, many others. And very soon, bigger and more expansive plans begin to hit the ground running. Through my few visits to Stratford Square Mall over the course of the last few years, I've gotten to see several names come and go. Some we have yet to see, and some that were open just a few years ago. This old Foot Locker I remember being one of the last brands in this entire wing. So I gotta ask, how long has this Foot Locker been here? Or I guess, how long was it here for? You see where that group of people are standing up there? That sort of patch of brownish looking tiles? Well, in good spirit to keep some of the mall's heritage alive, a past renovation kept small patches of the original flooring. So just know that those tiles have been there ever since she first opened her doors. On August 8, 1985, Main Street would officially open as Stratford's fifth official anchor, nestled neatly into the anchor pad north of the mall's food court. Throughout the 80s, Stratford would thrive at peak occupancy, consistently filling its halls daily. However, its honeymoon era was soon to end. Nearby malls such as Woodfield were planning massive expansions. In 1988, JCPenney would buy the Weebolt's name, expanding into the space. And in '89, just 4 years after opening, Kohl's would acquire the Main Street name, putting up their giant letters. Little did Stratford's mall rats know, but this would be the last truly prosperous decade for the mall. As with the next, Woodfield Mall's expansions were about to hit the ground running, and another million-square-foot mall was getting ready to open its doors just 8 miles away.
It's original time. Finish line still got all the pictures up.
At one point, this once vibrant anchor court belonged to Montgomery Ward, and it's hard to imagine that even that would have gone out of business over 23 years ago. Burlington, the last natives of the pad, have since left for greener pastures across the street. They were one of the others I remember still having a presence here in our last visit. However, now all of the spaces, save for Cole's, are dark and abandoned.
They clean it all out. Look at that.
In 1990, Sears would open as the mall's sixth and final anchor, completing the modern layout of Stratford Square. This wasn't the only new Sears store in the area, however. In April of 1991, Charlestown Mall would open just 8 miles away in St. Charles, and feature many of the same stores as Stratford. There would be a noticeable decline in foot traffic through the early 90s, which would only be further exacerbated by Woodfield Mall's massive expansion in 95, which saw the additions of Nordstrom and Lord & Taylor. And this is when the retail saturation of the area was becoming way apparent. All over the city, dead malls were becoming an issue, as the dozens of malls were all grasping for the same straws. Before the decade could cap out, however, Stratford had one last card up its sleeve, a way to hopefully refresh its image. On November 15th, 1999, Stratford Square Mall would officially reopen, as a major renovation to make the mall look like it does today would take place over that year. A new fountain, new restrooms, elevator, flooring, and dozens of modernized storefronts would appear all over the mall. The once dazzling stepped center court fountain was stripped away and replaced with a new Record Town store, which would eventually become FYE. All of these renovations were in hopes to keep the mall current and fresh. However, as many tenants' 20-year leases came due, Stratford Square would instead begin to struggle further, losing its position as one of the area's top malls. It would become dwarfed by dozens of adjacent big box developments along Gary Avenue and West Army Trail Road. Oh yeah, and you could say that this was also right around the time when online shopping was getting really big, so far fewer people were going out to the mall. Going into a new era, the once prominent anchor stores, which had forever staked the mall down, would begin to break free. While in Stratford Square for its final night, I was given the opportunity to talk with so many different people. Some workers of past stores, managers, the head of security in the 2000s. It was just such a unique and interesting experience. Within my visit, I heard stories of workers who put up walls over the years to cover empty storefronts, or those who changed out the signage above stores when they either switched hands or closed. One of the gentlemen I got to talk with told me the official phrase for walled off storefronts, but now I'm forgetting what it was exactly. So if anyone watching tonight happens to know what the official term for walling off empty store spaces is, please let me know down below. It's like on the tip of my tongue, but I just can't for the life of me remember what it was. On the 21st of April 2001, Montgomery Ward, after struggling with bankruptcy for years, would shutter their location at Stratford Square, along with 250 others. While many of the malls in the metro struggled to fill their Montgomery Ward spaces, Stratford quickly filled theirs with a Burlington coat factory, which would open in the fall of that same year. All over the mall, the directory began to dry up, as older, outdated brands in a new age were all going out of business, or struggling to fit into the mall's demographic. And it was all a domino effect, like it always is. The more brands that closed up shop, the less people would shop at the mall. And day after day, this degradation soon had urban investments with a burden on their hands. I love when my camera picks up just how truly warm Stratford is. No, that isn't edited. The mall really just has, through the wooden ceilings, that cozy, warm aesthetic. An aesthetic I've never seen in another mall and don't know if I ever will again. Upon reaching the center within a center, I found dozens of members of the community all gathered to eat cake, take photos, and converse, one last time under its golden roof. These people were all former workers of the mall who, I believe, either shouted out the name of their favorite store in the mall or the store they worked at. Probably the latter, but I'm not 100% sure. It was a pretty fun atmosphere regardless. Oh wait, here they go. Yeah, it was more of a jumble of stuff, but maybe you were able to pick out something from that. I decided to head downstairs and join the festivities, tour the food court, and begin the jazz funeral. But first, the jazz funeral is, as described by this guy coming up, a sort of remembrance walk through the mall, where the leader of the group plays a slow jazz song which, throughout the walk, gets faster and more lively. However, for most of the walk, it sounded more like one of the caretaker's broken albums. But I'll let you all get your own gist of the activities. In 2005, Feldman Properties would buy the mall from Urban Investments, after which point it had begun a serious decline. Name brands were closing up in droves and only ever being replaced by small mom-and-pop businesses, which themselves typically wouldn't last long. In 2006, both Marshall Field's would become Macy's, and Steve & Barry's would open near Burlington, demolishing several abandoned stores. Just a year later, in 2007, Feldman would oversee the old 4-screen theaters being completely reconstructed into a new 16-screen Cinemark megaplex. These were the last meaningful additions committed by Feldman, as going forward into the 2010s, with their ownership, they would only ever begin to strip things away from the mall. There was this sad, nostalgic vibe while walking through Stratford's food court and seeing the remains of one last food party, the last time food will ever be served in its food court. There was some strange nostalgia for me personally because seeing all the stacked pizza boxes and the happy conversing locals reminded me of maybe a school party in my childhood. Some long-forgotten happy memory being ever so slightly remembered while seeing and walking through these sights. It was nice. Like I said, everyone became a dead mauler here. I can't stress it enough. Everyone wanted to document everything. I mean, seriously, look at these guys. Ah, jeez, is this what I look like? In 2011, the giant replacement found in the center court, which was added in '99, would be stripped away and replaced with a carousel. This carousel would last for a short period before being taken down by Burlington and then being removed later. This all, of course, left the mall's center court completely empty. Burlington would close their upper level entirely in 2012. However, it was the loss of JCPenney in May of 2014 that would see a defeated Feldman sell the mall to a local group called Street Mac, who themselves hoped to bring the mall back to its former glory, starting with the opening of Round 1 in 2015 in the former Steve & Barry's. Street Mac hoped to diversify the mall and shift its base to 40% retail and 60% entertainment. Aside from a pub and an axe-throwing place, however, these plans would never really take off, as the mall's massive, old, outdated anchors would bring it all crashing down. It literally sounds like the caretaker. I gotta break away from that crazy monkey madness. In March of 2017, Macy's would join the parade, closing their store and leaving the entire western wing dead. Anchoritis is a real thing in malls, and suddenly, with several of these big names going dark due to bankruptcy and low foot traffic, Stratford was left with a serious burden, or I guess many serious burdens. That next year of 2018, Carson Pure Scott would too close their location at Stratford, shuttering their doors on August 29th. Now with only half of Burlington, Kohl's, and an already withering Sears name, the mall was on extremely shaky ground. Thankfully, something would be done with the abandoned Macy's, as in 2019 and through 2020, the space would be completely demolished and replaced with a Woodman's Food Market, which has zero connection to the mall. And truthfully, when looking at it from the road, it's like Stratford just disappeared behind Woodman's. The already shrouded mall is now dwarfed by this massive grocery store, which would only further negatively affect its image. These three gentlemen you see here getting their picture taken were three of the nicest guys I met while here. All of them formerly worked in this mall in some capacity. The guy on the left is Mike, and he was the manager of the Recordtown store, then turned FYE for over 20 years, so that store behind him means quite a bit. The guy in the middle is Mark. He was the head of security for 20 years, and then he became the manager for a while. He worked here for around 40 years, and really got to see every era of Stratford Square. And finally, the guy on the right is Dan, and I talked with him the most. He was the supervisor of security from 2006 to 2009. He actually managed to save some of the old neons in the old Recordtown arcade, or at least that's what I believe the space was. Super nice guy, and he even got me some super awesome Stratford mementos from my ventures. Overall, it was just really cool to actually see and hear real stories come from those who put years of their life into this place. It was something I'll never forget. In 2019, retail vultures Namdar would buy up the struggling Stratford Square, which year after year was facing loss after loss. Namdar, seeing the giant plot as just a big dollar sign, would instead begin to neglect the property, only seeing value in its land. Sears would close their doors in November of that same year, and in 2020, the pandemic would sweep over the mall, closing several of the remaining name brands. And through contract disputes with Namdar, 25 West Brewery and Round 1 would both close. Burlington Coat Factory, after decades in the former Montgomery Ward, would too end their lease in spring of 2023, moving across the street, which would leave Kohl's as the mall's last anchor. Walking through Stratford's food court one last time was a pretty bittersweet experience. Through my many visits to the Chicagoland area over the years, I always like to go out of my way and stop at Stratford, walk the halls, and get a bite to eat from the food court. Sakura Japan and Anna's Kitchen were all that was left for a while. And even back one evening in December of 2023, when some friends and I were here, I remember us browsing at a closing FYE, and then going across to the food court and finding that Anna's Kitchen was all that was left. And what a beautiful evening that visit was. I'll never forget what Stratford Square in the dark was like. By 2023, the village of Bloomingdale was on Namdar's butt to either sell the mall or do something of meaning with it. Through lawsuits and several tumultuous years of bids and buyouts, the village would finally acquire the mall in January of 2024 for $8.7 million, announcing that the mall would officially be closing its doors by April of that year. And on April 21st, 2024, the evening this all was filmed, Stratford Square Mall would close its doors after 43 years of service, ending its long run and finally getting some much-deserved rest. And that's where our story ends. In just a minute here, you too can see the mall's final closing announcement as police officers were brought in to hopefully disperse the crowds. It was a sad moment for sure, but I didn't see anyone leaving the mall with a frown on their face. I think everyone was just happy to be there one last time, happy to be with friends again, and happy to all be sharing this moment together. So folks, what do you think the future holds for Stratford Square? As I'm recording this voiceover in July of 2024, the mall still sits, dark and abandoned, and awaiting the wrecking ball. Currently, plans are all over the table for redevelopment of the land, but nothing is set in stone yet. So could some part of this breathtaking mall still be saved? Well, I guess only time will tell. If any of you are ever in the area, stop by Stratford Square, pay your respects to the mall, and maybe make a lap around its massive exterior. If you guys enjoy my Dead Mall content, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future Dead Malls episodes, and be sure to check out the Patreon for even more exclusive bonus content. As stated in a recent community post, I am finally done with week-long road trips and so ready to get back into making videos. So next week we'll be live at a mall of your choosing, but 2 weeks from now, we'll be back once again, this time to begin our next major expedition of this season. Tripping back out east, we head to a mall once home to a golden elder beerman, and just about the most charming small town aesthetic I've ever seen. Guess which mall we'll be at, and I'll shout you out in the next episode. But until then, have yourselves a lovely evening, and peace out, guys. See you later.
Can't let them win this time. I'm so back thinking over you. So stay out like this moon.
Our Superior Scott Court is literally flooded. Look at this. There's a goose just watching.